I thought I would give you a little bit of a look at how the exercises work so I could explain to you a good technique for doing the exercises. What I'm looking at right now is where you'll wind up at the first exercise with some instructions here. You get here once you establish an account, and then afterwards, every time you log in using the password you created in your establish account, you'll wind up at an exercise screen like this. You go directly here, even though we're using a system which is in itself a course management system similar to D2L, you don't have to navigate it. This system lets me link directly into the items I want you to get to, so it's another simplification. You don't have to go hunting around a menu to find things here. Now the next couple of exercises won't have this much verbosity at the top, but it will come up to looking something like this. And if we scroll down, I have to explain a little bit of confusion here to you. This business about when the quiz opens and when the quiz closes, for some reason, I suppose because this server supporting this system is located on the East Coast, it seems to mess around with the time. My intended time for the starting is 8 a.m., and the intended time for the closing here is January 21st at 11:55 p.m. You see, it's made these times 2 hours later. I'm not really too concerned about that. You should plan on finishing the exercise and doing it to your satisfaction by 11:55 p.m. on the Saturday on which the unit ends. That's when the exercise becomes inaccessible to you. However, if it really does turn out to be open 2 hours later, I'm not really too concerned. You've gotten a little bit more time than anybody who needed it, but I would hope you wouldn't be running the exercises that late into the unit when the unit is about ready to end. So this may be, if anything, more generous than I had normally allotted. So once it closes, it actually does close. Now let's go down here just a bit. What you're going to have to do is click this Continue the Last Attempt. Well, what does that mean? Yeah, it means take the quiz again. I've already tried it a couple of times, in this case, logged in as a student. So I'm going to continue the last attempt. Here we have the first question on exercise 1. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit so you can see the more relevant parts of it. Now what you're going to do here is simply check mark the statements that are true. So I will go through this and I will check mark mostly the true statements, and I'm kind of giving away the answers here on this very first item on the exercise, but that's okay. Ancient peoples probably use their art to work magic. Yes, I think so. Chronology of listings of the sequence in which these civilizations occurred. I will tell you right now, this is not quite correct, so I'm not going to check that one. Art may mean different things at different times and places. Very true. The fact that a thing was difficult to make proves that it's a work of art. No, that's really false, so I won't check that one. The Lascaux peoples drew pictures of animals in caves. These colorants, I think that's true. There's no wrong reason for liking a painting or sculpture, but there are wrong reasons for thinking that something is not good or valid, based on the technique used to create it or the level of its detail. Well, that's true. Now, the Lascaux peoples are referred to as prehistoric because they appear to have existed before recorded written history, which begins about 4000 BC. The civilizations that existed after this approximate date and before 500 are referred to as ancient. Well, that's true too. When we speak of primitive art, we imply that the people who made this art have only a primitive knowledge of their craft. Well, that's not really true. As you saw with the Lascaux cave art, the people who created that really did seem to have quite a good grasp of their art and the craft they were employing. They would draw pictures of animals probably a lot better than I could draw them. When we marvel at how an artist has captured a scene just right, it may seem simple and obvious. What we don't see is how much thought and study the artist has put into the work to make it seem this way. Very true. And here, if we find fault with the accuracy of a painting or picture, we have to question if whether the artist may have had his or her reasons for changing the appearance of what they saw. And that's true also. Now, if I go through and I show you the results of this, I'm fairly certain I'll get a perfect 10 on this. But I want to show you what happens if I had marked everything correct, except that I had marked one thing true that wasn't. What I do after finishing just one question, because I like to work these out just one question at a time, don't go doing the entire exercise at once, because you're only going to get the barest minimum of an indication back as to how you did. And if you combine all the questions prematurely, the result will be extremely confusing to you and of no real use in figuring out what to do next. So let's just do the one question. And I suspect I have one error in this. Let me submit it. Let me let the system take it away. And where do I find my result? Well, it's always going to be the last time that you took it. And unfortunately, because of the way the time gets a little bit mixed up, right now the time is 10:23, and this is showing 2:23, 4 hours later. I have no idea why it's doing that, but I suspect it's just the time zone difference between where we are. Well, I got 7 out of 10, and the only thing I did was question number 1. Okay, what's wrong? Well, the system is not going to give you much information about that. By my intent, I don't show you the way that you mark the questions. You should have recorded that on some notes. That's why I provide the notes in the workbook. So you should have marked those items before you came to the exercise on the system, and then used those notes to mark those statements. Now the statements will be in a different sequence because every time we do this, the statements come up in a different sequence in the question. So you have to read the statements. That's also by my intent. I want you to think about those statements that you're reading. I'll give you a hint. At most, 3 statements are incorrect. At the least, 1 is always incorrect. So you'll never have more than 3 incorrect statements, because as you read these, I'd like you to try and remember, by repetitious reading, the true statements. And perhaps the false ones will stick out in your mind too. What do we do now? Well, I would suggest you go back and review your notes on these questions. And you take a look at the notes for question 1, and you decide what you might have needed to review in order to come up with a better marking of those statements. And when you come back with those notes, you reattempt the quiz. Now let's take a look at how this appears. These statements are no longer in the same sequence. I'm going to have to think a little bit as I mark these. So I'm going to go here, and let's suppose I wanted to do something silly. I just wanted to say, you know what? I'm going to go for whatever partial credit I can get. I'm assuming now that the statements that I've checkmarked that really are true will give me credit, and that maybe I just won't get any credit for the ones I didn't mark correctly, the checked ones that are not really true. Now I'll submit that and finish. Now what happens? I got 1 point. Well, now how did that happen? What's going on here? Why do I get just 1 point? I certainly think I should have gotten credit for all the ones that are true that I marked. Well, I'm a little more devious than that. The ones that you mark that are true contribute something to the score. Any ones that you check mark that are not true subtract something significant from the score. Not all of it, although some incorrect selections may do that, but a chunk of it. And I do that because I'd like to prevent you from gaming these questions. So let's go back and do this again. Now, I've reviewed again some more. I'm going to try these and go at it with more knowledge, perhaps. When we marvel at an artist captures a scene just right, okay, I think that's true. The Sco peoples refer to prehistoric, that was true. Ancient peoples use their art to work magic, yeah, I think that's true. No wrong reason for liking art, true. When we find fault with the accuracy of a painting, yakety-yak, has reasons for changing the appearance of what they saw. Well, I think that's true too. The fact that a thing is difficult to make proves that it's a work of art? No. Otherwise, little carvings of ships in a bottle would all be regarded as works of art, and we don't really consider it that. Chronology listing of things, okay, but I already told you, I gave you a hint. This is not quite the correct sequence of civilizations. This is not true. I won't mark it. Let's go people's groups of animals using earth colorants, yes. The word art may mean very different things in different times and places. We speak of primitive art. We're thinking that these people were rather primitive in the sense that they didn't know their craft. That's not true. So this really is the correct marking. Now you know if I had put check marks here, I would have gotten something much less than a perfect score. If I mark these, I think I'm going to get a perfect score. Let's try one more time though, just to see what happens now if I omitted the marking of something that actually is true. So let me take that one away. When I submit all, and go here, and now I got 9. So what does that mean? Which one of the ones that I didn't check mark is true, or is that really the problem? I might have more than one error and still have gotten something decent in the way of a score. Because although every one of the correct check marks adds something to the score, they don't all add just 1. Some of them add a great deal more, and some of them don't add very much. So here too, we don't really know what that 9 means, except that we have not got it quite perfect. Well, I would go back and review, update my notes, make sure I understand what's going on here, and once again, evaluate my notes to see if I really do agree that this one is true. Do I really agree that this one is true? No, that's not true. Different things. Okay. When we marvel, just right. I think that's true. Prehistoric. That bunch of definitions is correct. Find fault. We have to question and give the artist the benefit of the doubt. The fact that it's difficult proves that it's a work of art. No. And I already know this chronology is wrong. Ancient peoples probably use magic. Yes. And the let's go people do pictures of animals. Okay. I think this now is correct. Once again, the statements have come up in a different sequence. I've had to read every one of these. I can't just check mark based on the position. Let me submit all and finish. And now let's go down here. Well, look at that. I've scored a perfect 10. That means if I've kept up my notes and they reflect how I check mark those statements, now I have confidence in my notes. They really are correct at this point. Now you can go on and do the second question and work through your notes that way and perfect them, and the third and the fourth and the fifth. You don't have to do it all in one sitting. But those notes become very valuable to you because for the last session that you do the exercise, you use those notes as a guide to mark every one of the statements as you had previously marked them and gotten the question correct. And then you fully expect, once you come through to this point, that you will have achieved 50. 50 on the exercises for units 1, 2, and 3. The exercise 4 has 8 questions on it. So that one's a little more lengthy because by that time we've covered more ground. So anyway, that's just a rundown on how these exercises work. I hope this is informative to you. If you wait too long within a unit to do the exercises, you will definitely become frustrated. As you can see from the number of times I've worked this through, mainly for demonstration purposes, you are going to do this some significant number of times. Don't expect just to do a rush job on this and do it well. And don't think that this is a quiz. Although the system labels it a quiz, you see the little word quiz, that's because the system still hasn't caught up to the fact that research indicates that this kind of engagement and re-engagement with material is a good way to learn. These things are still seen as if they were assessment devices given once just to sort of prove what you don't know. And that I don't think is a very effective learning technique. So my suggestion is do this exercise, start it early, pay attention to those notes and use them as you do your readings and viewings to help you consolidate the information that you're gathering, and then use them actively in doing these exercises. And plan on just doing the exercises in little pieces, one question at a time. You'll take a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction from perfecting your knowledge of one question, and at other times come back and do the others, and finally wrap the exercise up. And don't leave it till the last minute. That's a sure recipe for disappointment.